So the court strikes down the one-to-one consent rule at the last minute. So this means life insurance agents have the runway clear, absent any worry of being pulled into any TCPA lawsuit. Well, that's not exactly so, but let's talk about why. On January 24th, just 2.5 days before its effective date, the U.S. Court of Appeals of the 11th Circuit vacated the FCC's revised interpretation of prior express written consent, better known as the one-to-one consent rule. We've been covering this topic since the first ruling of this series dropped on December 13th of 2023, because these rulings have major implications for life insurance agents, insurance carriers, and the lead generators and sellers. Today, we're going to answer a few questions. Who was fighting it? Why were they really fighting it? What do we need to understand moving forward? And are we in the clear, or is there still some risk? Oh, and by the way, think of this video as a high-level overview. But don't worry, we're getting absolute clarity from the best source on the planet real soon. A friend of the podcast, attorney Eric Troutman, also known as the TCPA czar, will be rejoining us on the podcast for an in-depth interview in just a couple of weeks to get the updates on what's been happening and what we expect to come up next. So, who was fighting against the one-to-one consent rule? Well, the IMC, or Insurance Marketing Coalition, led the charge, filing a petition in the 11th Circuit. Their argument? Businesses did not have enough time to revise their operations before the January 26th deadline. Small businesses in particular faced a disadvantage, lacking the funds and resources to develop new software solutions in time. But let's be real, who was really making the most noise? The companies that stood to lose the most revenue, the ones profiting off selling regurgitated leads over and over again. And these companies have deep enough pockets to implement the necessary operational revisions. And their lobbying power is, well, quite powerful. But let's get to the immediate question. What does this mean for us moving forward? First, let's be clear. The one-to-one consent rule is the only major delay. That's it. You still need to capture consent before using automated dialers, pre-recorded messages, and even artificial intelligence. And that consent has limitations. Beginning in April of 2025, well, if this latest ruling sticks, that consent will have an expiration date. We're not going to go too deep in this today. We'll make a video on that soon as well, but that'll also be a good question to bring up when we bring Eric Troutman back on. But as of now, selling aged leads, that's still fair game. To understand where we are today, let's take a quick trip back to 2012. That's when the FCC first defined prior express written consent. Here's what they said, and I'll paraphrase slightly. An agreement in writing bearing the signature of the person called that clearly authorizes the seller to deliver advertisements or telemarketing messages using an automated telephone dialing system or an artificial or pre-recorded voice. In other words, this was already the rule. The one-to-one consent rule was just an extra layer that would have prevented lead generators from reselling data after the first sale. So if you've been wondering why the big companies like IMC and Integrity fought so hard against this ruling, it's quite simple. They make a fortune selling lead data multiple times over and over and for multiple years. And let's not forget, the court is still reviewing important language surrounding clear and conspicuous disclosure. And what does that mean exactly? Does the disclosure have to be forward-facing, like in the print just below a checkbox? Or can it be buried in a hyperlink, where the prospects would only see it if they click on a link leading to some T&C language? What about small gray text on the page? One thing remains certain. You must disclose who you are when obtaining consent. The consumer must know who will be contacting them. So what does this mean for you as an insurance professional? Here's the reality. If you're using auto dialers, AI voices, pre-recorded messages, You must have documented proof of consent. You must only contact the number that the consumer authorized. But if you're manually dialing, so long as the number's not on the DNC list, you're pretty much good to go. There's been a lot of dispute on this, and frankly, the interpretation can be read different ways. But let's be honest, this industry's been flying under the radar for years, only ramping up when COVID opened the insurance industry up to telesales. These latest rulings just pulled it into the spotlight. Think about it. Before December 13th, 2023, most life insurance agents, including myself, were not even aware of the prior express consent rules. But when the FCC introduced the one-to-one consent rule, it potentially put a major dent in the lead selling business model. Now here's a big question. How many times is a single lead sold before it becomes completely exhausted? Ask your big IMOs who provide leads to their agents. Never. I personally purchased a lead once that responded to a questionnaire 7 years prior. Well, stay tuned for another upcoming video. We're going to use ChatGPT to assist us in finding out just how many times a single lead gets sold and approximately how much revenue can be generated from a single form fill. But before we wrap up today, let me leave you with this. The rope may have loosened with the one-to-one consent rule getting vacated, but make no mistake, consent requirements still exist. And the ones abusing auto dialers and blasting calls to hundreds of people per day, they're really the ones putting the entire industry at risk. If you're not working to be a part of the solution, you just might be part of the problem. I understand making this statement does not make me very popular within certain communities, but that's not really the point. I'm wide open to hear from others. In fact, I want to. Although we publish these videos rather privately, the comment section is always open. Are you disappointed that the one-to-one consent rule was vacated? Or are you relieved because you rely on throwing a crap ton of age leads at the wall to see what sticks just to run your business? Or does this ruling not even matter to you because you operate completely outside of the realm of TCPA? Well, don't forget, our upcoming podcast with Eric Troutman is just around the corner. We'll announce that date real soon. I understand the critical nature of bringing clarity to many of these questions. But in the meantime, stay tuned for a couple more videos we've got upcoming. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions on clarity on these issues. But either way, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.